To be very honest, antinomy, it is not a word I use every day. And when I received it as the theme for this conference, I had to look it up. And the dictionary said that it was a contradiction of two beliefs or a mutual incompatibility of two laws. Now, never is that more evident when it comes to hearing ourselves speak and when it comes to hearing ourselves being heard. I have a passion for helping people to find their voice. But when it comes to contradictions, all we have to do is to look and to listen to the communication that comes to us. For example, we are told, get up, stand up, speak up for what you believe in. Tell the world what you want to tell them. And yet, when I was growing up, I had my dad say to us, children should be seen and never heard. I had our priest say to us, silence, my child, is golden. And I had my teachers say to us, there is a reason why God has given you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that you listen more and speak and talk less. But yet, there is a place in this world for both these strategies. Whether it's speaking up or staying silent, this actually never hit home to me more than on my recent visit to India, when I was there with the director and the screenwriter who are making a movie on my life story. And we were there a few weeks ago on a fact-finding tour, and they were meeting with my friends, interviewing my family, going on a tour of my school, and of all the places that we lived in Calcutta. And you can see Jack Shoulder there in the picture, and Josh Russell, who's the screenwriter. But Jack came to me and said to me, Jillian, after all the interviews, I want to ask you something. Up to about the age of 8 or 10, you never really said much. You only spoke when it was to help yourself, to help your family, or to help others. And that is true, but again, I never even spoke up, even when it was time for me to remain silent, because I had learned when to remain silent and when to speak up, even as a child. And we can achieve the same goal. But I want to share 2 stories with you very quickly to make my point. I want to share a story which I call the Mrs. Cleophas story, which they're putting into the movie. That's my little sister with me on my right, Vanessa, and that's myself. My parents faced abject poverty in India after India got her independence, and we were reduced to living under a flight of stairs. And my little sister and myself were so tiny at that time that we got seriously ill living there and playing in the lanes and playing in the streets. So my mother asked a very good friend, Mrs. Cleophas, will you look after my 2 little girls? And she said, of course I will. Bring them to me, Margaret. I will look after them. So my mom put us with her. But unfortunately, she was in love with my little sister, but not with me. And my little sister Vanessa is very naughty. She's a teacher in this country today, but she was very naughty. So when we used to be put on the floor to do our ABC and 1, 2, 3, etc., she would throw a little water on my book or put a pen through it just to get me into trouble. And Mrs. Cleophas used to come into the room and say, "Who did that?" And just not to get my little sister into trouble, I used to say, "I did." So she would take me by the ear downstairs to an Indian-style toilet, which was about 8 feet in height and 3 feet in width. And the toilet was infested with giant flying cockroaches, hundreds of them. And she put me into that toilet every single day, closed the door, and put off the light. And I had to endure that every day. So sometimes, even when it was the afternoon and it was a rainy day, I used to think that night has come, and I used to tremble with fear. And my mom used to visit to find out how we were doing, but we never ever got a word in. Because my mom used to say, "I hope y'all are saying y'all's pleases and thank yous, and that y'all are being obedient, y'all are grateful for what she's doing for y'all," so on and so forth. So I never got a word in. But I achieved my goal because I did not want to put additional pressure on my mom, who could not afford to take it at the time. And I knew that if my mom left us somewhere, she could go out and work and take care of us and pay Mrs. Cleophas something, and also take care of my dad, who was seriously ill in the Salvation Army at the time. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is that when we choose to remain silent, what will the cost of our silence be? Moving on, when my dad got better, he came and took us from there, and they took us to a little room in a slum that still stands to this day. In that little room, my little sister Susan was born. She was just 3 days old when my mom brought her home from the hospital and placed her on the little bed that we had. And my mom said, "You've got to say your goodbyes to her, because the doctors have said she's not going to make it." Now, I knew that my parents had already lost 4 little kids earlier due to poverty and very, very harsh circumstances. But for the first time in my life, I loved this little girl. I thought, what cute little fingers and toes. I wasn't even born at the time when my parents lost our 2 little sisters, and I was very, very tiny at the time when my parents lost twins, Kimberly and Alan. But for the first time, I looked at Susan and I thought, what do babies need? Milk. And I remembered seeing milk at the tea shop, which is the picture of the man on the left. I ran to the tea shop with my little bowl and I said, "Ashok, do you mind? Can you give me a little milk?" He said, "Child, go away. Nobody gives anyone anything free these days. We all know that." But I still stood there and I repeated myself, "You can save my sister's life if you give me that milk. Please help me." For the first time, I had found my voice after what Mrs. Cleophas had done to me. I found it in me to speak up when I needed to. And I took the milk home, which he gave me. I mixed it with that little powdered medicine that the doctors gave my mom. And I used to squeeze her cheeks together, and I used to feed her that medicine with the help of a very old, broken down alarm clock. And Susan lived past 3 days, and 3 months, and 3 years. And today she's married to a lovely boy in Australia, and she has 2 beautiful children, Samantha and a little baby, Oliver. But that's when I found it in me to speak up. And it wasn't easy to do. So the question again that we need to ask ourselves is, if we do decide to speak up, what will the cost be to us? The moral of my lesson is this, that whether we speak up for what we need or whether we choose to be silent, there are going to be consequences. And there's sometimes going to be personal cost. But the question we need to always step back and ask ourselves is, how great is that cost going to be? And what is that cost going to be to us personally? But now, having looked at both sides of the coin, I can only tell you this, that whatever happens, it is right for us to find our voices and to speak up for ourselves and for others if we want to leave a lasting impact on this world. Thank you very much.